witnesses. Can I go back, first of all, mistaken to what you were saying about the potential? I think you said £4 billion of market share, and that may be a stretch. Is that correct? Just explain that figure to us.
So that's the target from the Scottish Government strategy, 10-year strategy by 2031. That is a share of a huge global market. So the overall global market is going to be over $400 billion at that stage. So it is achievable, but to be able to do it, it's a globally competitive industry space, and we are seeing folks who are our competitors around Europe and elsewhere, seeing that we've got stolen a slight march and are looking to catch up on our progress. So we are...
So if that's a stretch, what's realistic?
So I think that's realistic. It's a good stretch ambition.
It's a stretch, but it's also realistic.
Can be both.
I think so. I think you can have a stretch target that you also achieve.
Okay.
That's what we're aiming to do. I think the ultimate target is that we will take the industry as far as it can with the skills and the budgets that we've got. I think demonstrating that commitment and that we want that market share is also a good signal to investors and others that we're going to stand alongside them and partner with this industry.
So you take these government figures out to the international market and say, this is what the Scottish Government say about X, Y or Z, it's in our strategy, therefore can we get investment, etc.
Yeah, I think
So there's got to be a lot of trust in these figures.
Yes.
Yeah. And you've previously come to this committee back in March of this year when we're speaking about wind energy. You'll know where I'm going to with this. How confident are you that the shambolic episode we saw with the Scottish Government claiming that Scotland could have 25% of Europe's wind energy is not going to be repeated? And given what has occurred since then, and ministers potentially misleading Parliament, we are writing as a committee to previous SNP ministers who've used wind energy figures, is there a risk that confidence in what the Scottish Government are saying as targets and what is achievable is diminished by the lies that have been told over wind energy?
Okay, right, order. I think let's try to stick to parliamentary language and discuss if we can.
Mistruths that have been told over wind energy. Does that have an impact?
Just doing the same thing.
Does that have an impact in terms of you then going out with new figures in another area and the confidence that will have been diminished as a result of that?
So we have really trusting relationships with the investors and the global partners that we work with. People still do business with people, and so I think relationships are absolutely key. Whenever there's any errors in any sort of data and figures, we correct it, we make sure people are aware of that. We haven't seen any adverse impacts in our relationships with investors and others as a result of that.
Just on that, you were speaking about the 20 I can't remember, back in March. Were you aware of the corrections that had been made to the Scottish Government's targets back then?
Can we just...
Well, I'm just, because we're speaking about correcting.
Order. We're here to discuss the Scottish space sector. We've not got all that much time with colleagues from Scottish Enterprise, SEI. Is it possible that we might be able to stay on the subject so we can secure the best possible information and evidence from our witnesses?
I'm happy to stay on the subject I was going on. So in terms of corrections that you ultimately make, were you aware when you gave that evidence back in March that it wasn't a reliable figure on the wind energy?
So was I aware at the time of the figures that we were using?
Mm-hmm.
So I always use the figures that we think are the accurate figures.
Provided by the Scottish Government. And there's some conflict now in terms of when they first became aware, we were told it was an outdated... Are you not allowing this line of questioning, Chair? I'm
wanting to have a line of questioning which is at least slightly in line with the evidence, the report and the inquiry that we're conducting today. Now, please conclude your question. Can we then move on to discussing the Scottish space sector and see if we could get some useful information from our colleagues on that?
Interesting sensitivity from the SNP Chair. So I will take on board what he said and move on to the point I made. You were in the room...
You spoke over before.
Yes, Mr. So Brown. Yeah.
When you didn't like my line of questioning, which I thought was out of order, but we're here to discuss the space sector.
Okay, order. I think we've established we're here to discuss the space sector, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Mr. Ross.
I was making, I'm not sure what Mr. Brown was saying there, it was difficult to follow.